I don't know who needs to hear this, but he's just a man. He's not even hot. He looks like he lives under a bridge. He's not funny. He's not kind. He messed with your head and he messed with your heart. Remember who the you are. You are hot. You are amazing. You're kind and you're funny and you're cool. What is he? He's just some guy. What are we gonna do? Move the on. He can go get dumped by some other girl, which he will be, because he's trash.
I'm sorry for all of the beeping noises. YouTube's been demonetizing my videos. And in fairness, she was swearing a lot. Have you noticed how much more common this is nowadays? Women swearing, there's absolutely no femininity in the way that they speak at all. I was at a lake last weekend and there were these three girls talking to each other and like the sound carried across the water. So even though I was at a big distance, I could hear everything that they were saying. And listening to these three girls talk to each other was honestly depressing. They were talking about how many likes they'd gotten on their recent Instagram pictures. They were criticizing other women. They were talking about how drunk they'd gotten on the weekend. All of it in this really harsh, sort of aggressive way of speaking. This woman is just completely obnoxious. The way that she speaks, it just grates at my soul. It's awful to listen to. And I've seen the correlation enough times now that I'm actually telling men that if you're dating a woman who swears all the time, she's always yelling, she's always got that loud, aggressive tone of voice, you're better off finding a different woman because it's a huge red flag. I think that whether or not a woman actually speaks with any femininity is a huge insight into her deeper character. And to illustrate this, I want to tell you a personal story from my life about these two women that I used to interact with. But really quickly, I'm just letting everybody know that the last educational module is now available for Patreon, and it's the last one that's going to be made available for free. That's it, no more. The next ones that you'll see will be available for purchase, which will hopefully be in a couple of months' time. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, I create these educational videos. They're kind of like questionnaires or exams. They're really long. They're about 40 minutes long typically, and they feature a story with all of these questions, and it's designed to test your knowledge of female psychology, gender relations, all that stuff. You get a score out of 10. The feedback on these has been amazing. People absolutely love them. I'm so excited to finally release this as a paid product. It's going to be huge. And so yeah, this is the last one that I'm making available for free on Patreon. I'm going to be deleting it in 7 days like I've done with the previous ones. I've just been releasing them to Patreon as a sort of special thank you for people with their ongoing support for me. So if you want access to this one, you got 7 days and then it's done. Okay, back to my personal story and these two women that I used to speak with. They were very close friends, but I noticed that they had a really different way of interacting with me, a totally different style, the way that they would speak with me. One of the women was very feminine. You know, she spoke to me kindly, respectfully. She always listened to everything that I would say. She would never interrupt me. Whereas the other friend was really aggressive, sort of masculine in the way that she would speak. Things were tense talking to her, almost like that feeling like she was trying to compete with me in some, masculine way. I could always notice the contrast between the two women when we were in a group together talking about a potentially controversial issue, some social issue or political thing. With the feminine woman, I always felt safe to express my point of view, knowing that she would listen respectfully and that she would be curious how I reached the conclusions that I did. And so she'd ask follow-up questions. She cared about what I thought. She wanted to understand. It didn't matter at all if we didn't actually agree with each other because we weren't competing. It was an actual exchange of ideas. She wanted to know where I was coming from. And that spaciousness, that was facilitated by her kind femininity meant that I could fully explore everything that I wanted to explore. And then she would respond and then I'd ask her and I'd listen to her point of view and we would learn a lot from each other. Very productive, very enjoyable conversations. That's what femininity can facilitate. But whenever her more masculine friend was present, the conversations took on a very different tone. Like she had this habit of expressing an opinion so strongly, like just out of the gate, just like, this is how it is, or this is what I think. And with such like emotion behind it that socially, it just didn't really feel safe to ask questions or certainly not to express a contrary point of view. That would feel like you were challenging her. And so it just meant that the conversations were boring because you couldn't really exchange information or ideas. It seems as though that has become more common over the years. Fewer and fewer women are speaking in a feminine way, sort of loud volume, really emotional, really aggressive. That's sort of become the norm. Like that woman at the clip that I showed you at the beginning, like her way of speaking was just so vulgar. And I find it incredibly ironic that she probably thinks that men are awful. She probably hates men, and yet she seems to be doing her absolute best to imitate toxic masculinity. You know, it's like, I hate men who are so aggressive and always, speaking in absolutes and talking down to anybody. And so now I'm going to talk in that exact same way. I mean, it sucks, right? Like in this video, I'm lamenting the lack of femininity in women and sort of mourning about the way that they speak now in conversations. But I'm not saying that I enjoy really aggressive tone of voice and manner of speaking from men either. That's also awful. Right now, you can probably think of that guy in your life who's just really unpleasant to speak to. Everything feels like a fight or an argument. He's just too aggressive in the way that he expresses his opinions. But that's my point, is that hyper aggressiveness, it's unpleasant. And why on earth are women adopting that? To quote the woman from the clip at the beginning of this video, I don't know who needs to hear this, but my message is that femininity isn't weakness. We need to start valuing that femininity more. Any women who are listening, please do not be ashamed of your femininity. Do not cast it out and think that you need to imitate men in order to have value. You have value as a woman. We need that. Speaking in a normal voice at an appropriate volume is not weakness. Being a woman, being a feminine woman is not weak. The world needs you. We've had enough of awful toxic men acting like bullies and tyrants and screwing up the world, that now we really need actual feminine women to stand up and show us an alternative route. We need a more kind approach, a more feminine, gentle approach. Please, I really hope that this message gets through. I'm absolutely sincere. We need women. We need women's help, but we don't need women acting like the worst of men. That's not going to help anything. I expounded on this in my video about why I don't believe in equality feminism. I believe in difference feminism. So check out that video if you want to understand my perspective more. But it begs the question, why are women acting like this? Well, for some women, I imagine it comes from the frustration that they feel in seeing the lack of masculinity in the men around them. Men have become too soft, too weak. There's not enough masculinity in their lives. And so sensing that vacuum, they feel like they need to actually step up and they provide some of that masculinity, but it doesn't come naturally to women. So they very rarely are able to do it well. It turns toxic quickly. The way I would put it is that when women are trying to imitate masculinity, it looks like toxic femininity. I think for other women, the reason why they start talking in this hyper aggressive tone is because they were probably genuine victims of some awful men. And there's that temptation to enact some of the same traits that your abuser had, almost as a form of protection. I'm going to become like the person who hurt me so they can't hurt me anymore. So those are two possible explanations. Women are either sensing men are too weak or too toxic, and that's driving them to be like this. But I don't think that's really the main reason what's going on here. My perspective is actually a little bit more simple. I think that we've just stopped holding women to any standards. We've reached that crazy tipping point where having any expectations as a man for how a woman should behave is sexist. In this culture, women are a protected species. And so having any standards for how you think a woman should be behaving and how she should be talking, how she should be carrying herself, that's sexist. That's the patriarchy, blah, blah, blah. We need to protect women from that. Well, guess what? It actually turns out that when you have no standards for how somebody should behave, then there's no expectation for them to be on their best behavior. And so they start to devolve. By not having any accountability for women, we're not protecting them, we're failing them. And guess what? Women are not happy with this arrangement. Women don't want to have any standards. They're miserable. Like this woman that we saw at the beginning of the clip. Did she look at all happy to you? Talking the way that she does is not an expression of happiness or contentment or inner peace. It's a cry for help. Where is a genuinely good man with positive masculinity who has expectations of me, who encourages my femininity, who expects that of me, who wants me to become the best version of myself so that I can become worthy of him? Any woman listening who is interested in my content because they want to learn how to attract a high quality man, please take this advice on board. Cultivate your femininity. Learn to speak in a feminine way. Despite what modern propaganda may have told you, your femininity, speaking in a feminine way, is not a weakness. It's perhaps your greatest strength. And guess what? It's what men find attractive. If you're really loud and you're always yelling and you're swearing, here's what a high quality man is going to think when he sees you behave in that way. Geez, that looks really unpleasant. I bet anytime we have a minor disagreement, she's just going to start yelling and swearing. I don't want to deal with that. I'm going to go try and find a much kinder, more feminine woman. When you speak with some grace and femininity, it's going to make him more attracted to you because he's thinking, God, I love this energy. It's so calming. It's so peaceful. I bet anytime we have a disagreement, she's going to be able to handle it with rationality and respect and kindness. That's what I want. It also signals how she's going to be as a mother. When you have children with her, is she going to be kind and gentle and compassionate with her children? Or is she just going to resort to yelling and screaming? Is she going to be a slave to her emotions? The culture is making great progress at encouraging fathers to be more hands-on with their children, to leave that stereotypical, like, I'm just the strict disciplinarian role and actually emotionally connect with their children. That's fantastic, but it's taking some time. We would like some assistance from women to show us the way. And I think that even for more traditionally minded men who are conservative, who are sort of resisting taking on that role, they still appreciate the femininity and the nurturing that women can bring to their children. So even if he wants to be that strict disciplinarian, he's attracted to women who he knows are going to be able to make up for the things that he's not able to bring. So it makes sense, right? Like when a man is seeing a woman interacting with other people, speaking, there's a part of his brain that's always imagining, how would I feel if she was speaking to my child in that way? Because guess what? So much of what guides our attraction romantically, sexually, is based on the capacity that we see in the other person to be a good parent. I made a whole Patreon video on this. You can check it out. It's on how to tell whether or not your girlfriend is going to be a good mother. Because biologically speaking, that is what is behind our attraction to the opposite sex. Of course it is. Why would it be about anything else? So men, if you encounter a woman who has no femininity in the way that she speaks, be cautious. That's a big red flag. You've got to look out for these signs, learn how to interpret them, because you don't want to be years into a relationship thinking, actually, this nightmare that I'm in with this low quality woman was predictable from way back at the beginning of the relationship. I just kind of closed my eyes, blocked my ears. I didn't want to see it. No, at the start of the relationship, that's when you've got to be paying attention. Following on from that, I want to finish this video by speaking directly to any members of my audience who are from Germany. There are these great videos, the 10 signs of a toxic woman, 10 ways to test a woman's quality in German. And they're made by a buddy of mine, Klaus Thiel. Great guy. I've known him for years. He has very similar content to mine. And I just wanted to bring him up for my audience who might be from Germany in case you haven't come across him yet. Definitely go check out his channel. For those of you who don't speak German, you just speak English and you want to hear more about this stuff, come over to my Patreon. Remember, this is the last chance you're going to have to see one of my educational modules for free. Next time they're going to be available, they're going to be part of a paid product. So if you've been thinking about signing up to my Patreon, now's the perfect time to do it.